Hello everyone, my name is Brian Leeners. I am the CEO and the Director of Homerun Resources, and I'd like to introduce everyone to our company, and hopefully we'll have a few questions at the end of this presentation. Our vision is to be a leading materials company in the high purity silica energy and industrial verticals. The mandate and mission behind that is to do that within the context of being sustainable and responsible, and to improve the lives of the people that we affect in the jurisdictions in which we operate. So we foster a culture of harmony with those people and to improve their lives both from an economic and social perspective. Our roadmap's quite simple. It has 3 phases. We started in 2023. Really started with the signature of an agreement with CBPM, which is the resource company of the state of Bahia in Brazil. That agreement was signed in December of 2023, and upon signature of that agreement, we entered into phase 2 of our business plan, which is to build out the logistics and planning relative to moving that product to port, so that we can sell that product internationally. And then that transitions into phase 3, which is vertical integration. And it's using that core raw material, super high quality silica, in order to build out verticals in the energy transition sector in Brazil, with a focus in particular on solar and energy storage, both utility scale energy storage, and also on the implementation of battery anode materials into the battery space. So simply put, energy storage and also solar. We had a milestone announcement in the last 3 months, which lined us up with a German entity that operates in Brazil. That organization is currently in the process of getting permits and getting financing relative to building out a very large solar cell manufacturing opportunity in the state of Bahia in Brazil. That LOI that we signed, which will shortly become a formal agreement, was to deliver 365,000 tons of solar glass into that operation on an annualized basis once we reach scale. Our strategy at Homerun is to partner up in order to facilitate a fast track both the cash flow and the further development of the vertical strategy. Our partnerships initiate with NREL, which is the U.S. Department of Energy's research arm based in Colorado in the United States. We have a 2-part relationship with NREL. The first of those parts is to work on new techniques in order to process our already high purity silica to higher purity. And the ambition there is to get it to 99.99 using their research techniques. The second part of the NREL relationship is to participate as a partner in their energy storage system, which is called the Enduring Energy Storage System. This is a thermal particle energy storage system, and it uses silica as the medium of storing heat energy, which has been transitioned from electrical energy on the input and transitions back to electrical energy on the output. Within that context, we recognize the opportunity based on the heat levels that are maintained inside the silo that stores the silica, that reaches a temperature that allows for calcination of silica. And that's how we're integrating the processing concept into the energy storage concept. The goal of that partnership is to produce an energy storage system that also is a processing system for silica, and hence it would be the only energy storage system in the world at a utility scale that has an ancillary revenue stream from the upgrading of that silica. Cheap silica in, quality, more expensive silica coming out. In partnership with that, we're working with BMW, a U.S. company in the energy space, and has been so for over 100 years. And with BMW, NREL is developing the system that produces this storage mechanism. and we're working with BMW and NREL and a few other partners relative to completing that project. Of significance is the U.S. Department of Energy has announced the funding of the first pilot, and that will be built on NREL's campus in Colorado. Our significant partnership, as previously stated, is with CBPM, the resource corporation of the state of Bahia. And within that partnership, there are many other advantages, including a relationship to the highest levels of the state and relationships in federal government ministries and federal government partnerships relative to banking opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So we're working down all those paths, and we have deliverables under that agreement, but that lease agreement is basically a 20-year plus 20-year agreement and gives us full range of development and access and extraction rights to the resource that comes under that lease. NDO is the Oman, the country Oman equivalent of CBPM. Oman has a very large silica endowment, resource endowment, and the Minerals Development of Oman, MDO, are in the process of working to develop that endowment, and we're working with them to do that. The first stage of that is to test the silica that they control, and we're doing that through our relationship with Enzaplan in Germany. Halocell Energy is a advanced Perovskite company. Perovskite is the next generation of solar technology, and we are working on strategies relative to combining our silica to solar glass strategy with theirs, which is a advanced technology platform in the Perovskite space. We'll see more advancements in that vertical integration in the solar side over the next few months. And CEMEX Solution is our partner relative to traditional solar. CEMEX has the mandate and approvals from the state of Bahia to build out a large photovoltaic, traditional photovoltaic silicon-based plant in Camaçari in Bahia. They're in the permitting process. There's two sets of permits in that process. One is construction, the other is operate. And based on our ongoing dialogue with CEMEX, they are about 12 months away from the end of that permitting process. And they're in the stage of getting their finalized plans and feasibility studies, again, through that process. Our management team, you can read this up, but what we're really proud of is the quality of individuals that we've brought to the team within Brazil. Antonio Vitor is our country manager and a key individual in the build out of the company from both a resource, but also from a banking and government relationship perspective. A vital asset for our company. Dr. Moreau is our CTO with an extensive history in material science, and he's heading up internal efforts on the R&D side and managing the R&D relationships that we have with our partners in the U.S. Armando Fahati is our new Chief Operating Officer. He came on board in the spring. He has an extensive background in building out operating plants, and also in operating those plants. So he's a key individual from the perspective of building our logistics and the operating side of our business. And Nancy is our CFO, whose job is to integrate the financial accounting public side in Canada with the operating side in Brazil. Phase one of the business plan is really supply. The key component of phase one is that from the beginning, we have been working on either owning or controlling all aspects of the district. We're in that process. We recently made an announcement, which was the third announcement relative to that strategy. The first being a supply agreement with one of the parties in the district. The second being the CBPM agreement. The photo there is our agreement. And then the third is the just announced agreement with Guidoni. And we've taken over their lease with CBPM, and we're bringing that under our umbrella. There'll be further announcements relative to partnerships and other opportunities in the district to advance that mandate to control that district. The reason we wish to control that district is we see the long-term benefit of this high purity silica, which is one of the best silica resources in the world, competitive with Mitsubishi in Cape Flattery in Australia and competitive with Sibelco at Spruce Pines in the US. And those currently are the top of the pyramid assets in the world. You can see by the grade here, what's really important here is when you just wash this product and dry it and size it, in other words, you get rid of the fines and lumps, you end up with an extremely high quality product in the 99.9 plus range. This work was done by Anzaplan. Our goal again is to take this product up to north of 99.99. We've now achieved that. We recently announced our relationship with UC Davis. The first aspect of that research relationship was to use laser treatment in order to remove impurities. That research was successful, and we have now achieved 99.999% purity. That product is top of the pyramid and sells for thousands of dollars per ton. You can see the pyramid here. Again, that 99.999%, or what they call 5 nines, sells for somewhere in the range of $10,000 US per ton. There's really only 2 entities on the planet that sell that purity, as previously stated. Business plan phase 2 is infrastructure and revenue. This is something that Armando, our COO, has been working on since coming into the company. But really, we've been working on this since the day we signed the CBPM lease back in December of 2023. And this is to work on extraction, processing, and transport and port facilities in order to facilitate international sales of this product. The first aspect of that is to get the product to the ocean, and the nearest available terminal is owned by a corporate entity in the same district where the resource exists. We're in long dialogue and in terms, basically, with that group in order to utilize some of the infrastructure and logistics that they've put in place. This will facilitate our medium to long range plans of having a very proximal ability to get to the ocean and start using the ocean to transport this versus truck. In the short term, we'll use traditional truck transport, but in the medium to long term, the idea is to utilize ocean transport both for domestic sales and for international sales. The interim port that we'll be utilizing is in Ilheus. It's already set up. It's just received significant government capital for upgrading the port. This is a relatively short distance from our resource. It can be reached by state highway, which are in good shape. There's storage facilities at the port, and the port can accommodate fairly large ships. So from a short-term perspective, this presents the international sales opportunity. Our own domestic use of the product within Brazil will start in Camaçari. We're working with the government in order to facilitate a ground position in that area where we can build out our planned solar glass facility. We need a port to bring that product into that area, and the port of Aratu facilitates that process. This entire industrial complex, inclusive of the port of Aratu and the industrial area in Camaçari, is the largest industrial facility scaled in what's called Nordeste, the northeastern part of Brazil, and is very close to the city of Salvador. So all logistics in place, very modern. The port is quite young. This is what a standardized processing facility would look like for silica processing. We don't really need this in order to sell our product. What we really need to sell our product is to wash it, dry it, sort it, and bag it. So we have a relatively low processing need or hurdle, and that gives us the ability to sell that product internationally. You can't really sell the raw material internationally unless you're selling it for very low prices that create literally no margin. The use of silica in the traditional industrial space is enormous. This is the second most used industrial commodity in the world next to water. So there is a historic traditional market for this product, both at high purity and low purity. A low purity example would be a sandbox in your backyard. A high purity example would be in chemical production and in high quality glass. And obviously silica is the main component of solar, both from the silicon side and also from the glass side. Markets that are available to us, although we're looking for a partnership relationship in Asia, but direct markets that can be reached easily from Brazil because it's a linear transportation line is the eastern coast of the Americas, in particular the United States and Canada, and European access direct. So we avoid canals and the high tariffs related to that type of transport. Puts us into a very competitive position with the largest players in the space, which are in Asia. Business plan phase 3 is vertical integration. The vertical integration strategy, as previously stated, is focused on solar and energy storage. The idea is to build out this vertical integration in Brazil, take advantage of our core raw material as a strategic advantage, and then build on top of that facilities and manufacturing capability in solar glass, partner up potentially with entities that wish to transition our product into silicon for that space. Also looking at solar glass in the new Perovskite solar space, and then the energy storage side, which would be battery anode, and the work that we're doing with NREL related to the thermal energy storage. There's more detail on this slide related to what we're doing in the research and development area. We've made several announcements already. And this is a detailed partnership slide relative to our internal research and development, led again by Dr. Moreau, our NREL research mandate with the Department of Energy in the U.S., product development with UC Davis, announcements have already been made, and Perovskite, where we're working with Halocell Energy, who have 10 years of Perovskite experience already, and that is to jointly develop business models within that Perovskite space. This is what a solar glass plant would look like. This would be a single run solar glass plant. We're working with a group out of Germany, who are the foremost group, I would argue, in Europe or probably in the world relative to building solar glass plants. And again, we already have an offtake relationship with Cemex to provide up to 365,000 tons of solar glass on an annualized basis in Brazil. The real strategic advantage there is there will be minimal, if no logistics in delivering that solar glass to Cemex, which eliminates Chinese competition, because the Chinese, like every entity in the solar glass space, the majority of their costs are shipping that product overseas. In this relationship, we would not have to do that. We would literally have to hand that product over a fence. The glass plant is in the engineering stage. We're waiting for the allocation of the ground that where we would build that. That's the last stage that the engineering group needs to have in place in order to initiate the engineering study that we will need in order to get our permit, both a construction permit and an operating permit in Brazil. Again, more research and development, but in particular, this is on the Perovskite photovoltaic side. Internally, we're working again with Dr. Terrence Moreau leading that effort. We're also working with NREL in evaluating their Perovskite portfolio, and with Halocell again as our partner. And this is an image of the research and development work that we're doing with the NREL folks. That's a visualization of what a enduring facility would look like. This is a utility scale energy storage system. It will not be in someone's backyard. It would sit next to a large industrial situation, or as a distributed storage facility within the grid, or as a primary storage facility next to an energy generation situation. Rather elegant when combined with alternative energy as the generating source. This is our share structure, fairly up to date. I think this was done in July. We have roughly 55 million shares outstanding. Dilutables are stock options owned by insiders. There's around 9 million of those. Average price is 37 cents. Warrants, we have 6 million. Those are being exercised strategically within the context that we know the warrant holders. So that never hurts our market. And those are divided over a 75-cent strike price, which is a recent financing, and over a 20-cent strike price, which is a financing that was done in March of 2023. So right now we're getting the 20-cent warrants exercised. That's putting capital into the till. We have a really low burn rate relative to what we're doing. So we don't have any major financing needs in the foreseeable future. The only identified need is Capex related to the medium to long-term logistics strategy, and then obviously the Capex required for the glass plant. But the glass plant will be placed into a special purpose vehicle so that the holding company, Homerun Resources, is not diluted relative to that investment. We would rather partner with our investors in that special purpose vehicle. And that's the company.
Brian, could you tell us about yourself and your career?
My career, how much time do you have? I have a degree, 2 degrees actually, from the University of British Columbia. One is a business degree. The other is a law degree. Called to the bar in British Columbia in 1993. Was a lawyer officially for about 14 hours, because I moved into the investment banking industry. Worked for a boutique equity house, Canada-wide boutique equity house, called Burns Fry for 3 years. And then realized that my calling was across the street, not on the banking side. I was better at business strategy and helping develop companies. So I did that with a focus right from the beginning on materials and tech. My first CEO opportunity was in 1997-98. That company did really well from a market performance perspective. Did some private transactions after that. Then in 2002, I built up my capital company, which is called Nexvu Capital, and I've been operating under that umbrella ever since. And Nexvu's mandate is materials and tech, obviously. And within that mandate, we've raised north of $100 million US, not including transactions that have happened in the market over that, almost, 23 year period now, or 22 year period, now that I think about it. So yeah, roughly 30 years in the industry, in private and public opportunities. We recognized the energy transition fairly early on and went out and secured assets as our first step. Our silica asset is not the only one we have in the Nexvu organization. We have copper, graphite, silica, and rare earths in that organization. But Homerun is the leading company in our energy transition strategy.
And are you a founding partner of Nexvu Capital?
I am the founding partner. I have now, because we've been around for so long, I have 2 retired partners. So I'm kind of the lone soldier in that, and really that's just a holding company for the partnership. And that's kind of where we direct our early stage capital. Although we've expanded that, we're now working with other capital groups relative to early stage capital for the private enterprise.
What would you consider to be your greatest achievement so far, career-wise?
From a market valuation perspective, definitely Homerun. But I don't think we're anywhere close to the peak of that value. So I'm going to have to say Homerun, because it just has an incredible opportunity to achieve a very significant valuation just on the resource. I mean, I don't think people really understand how important quality is in the silica space. And one of the biggest reasons behind that, Jasper, is that silica is a product where you move the whole thing, right? You know, with gold, you process at site and hopefully you're moving, bars of gold, which is relatively easy to do with an airplane. But with silica, you're moving the entire resource. You're starting at 99+%. So it's a logistics business, but we are endowed by Mother Nature with an incredibly high initial grade resource. And that initial grade resource is what puts us into a very good position at the top of the silica pyramid. The bottom of the silica pyramid is $20 a ton. The top of the silica pyramid is $10,000+ per ton. Obviously, the size of those markets is inverted as well. The top of the pyramid is a relatively small market, but the margins in that area are incredible.
Fantastic. So then, could you add some further color to how you have built a team at Homerun?
Yeah, I mean, historically in our business development strategies, we've realized that you need to have a combination of talents. My strategy talent is really what I'm probably best at. Negotiation, business strategy, and business vision. I am not an operator. I get very nervous when we hire human resources directors in our organizations, because then I realize I don't know everybody on a personal basis. That's kind of how I like to do business. So I work really well with the senior management team, and I think we've achieved an exceptional senior management team based in Brazil. The ability, the history, the successes of our team are notable, and the team works really well together. There is zero ego on that core team. Everybody has overlap in their skill set, but everybody on that team has a distinct competitive advantage that they bring to the table. So it keeps the team small when you have that abilities, people who can do multiple tasks. And so we really have our senior management team in place. The next level would be more of an operating team, the people who run the various divisions of the company. And as we build those out, we'll bring those people on board, although some of those people have already been identified, in particular on the resource side. But we need those people on the operating and logistics side.
How many shares of Homerun do you hold?
My direct ownership personally is, I don't even remember. I've never sold a share, so I haven't sold a share in any company since I think 2010 or something. So from that perspective, I just added, I'm at several million, and then I have options on top of that. So on a fully diluted basis, I think I'm close to 10% of the company.
Could you give us an overview of the ownership structure? I mean, you have a lot of insight. Who are your key shareholders, really?
We've got significant shareholdings, again, in our Nexvu Capital partnership, and our Nexvu Capital partners. These are the original, folks that basically paid the bills on the public company before, this model, was put in place. We had a core group of shareholders that were in that original company, about 11.5 million, shares. Some of those people we knew, some of those people we didn't. We're now at 55 million shares. We know everybody personally who's come into the last 3 or 4 financing. Some of those people have elected to take profit. Other of those people have elected to increase their positions. I think you'll notice by the way the company reacts to news with value that we have an incredibly tight long-term shareholder base. It's not 100%, it never is, but it's significantly higher than you normally see on a junior type company, either on an ASX or a TSX Venture type exchange.
Could you walk us through the history of Homerun Resources? When were you founded, and just maybe add a quick summary to say last year and in the past?
We put the name in place a few years ago prior to this actual business strategy, and then we started transitioning again into the energy transition space when we started to identify that. So we immediately started looking for assets in that space. We originally were going to do a rare earth transaction, but in Canada, those don't get much bandwidth. So when the silica opportunity came along, and it's a funny story how that came along. I actually Googled that. I Googled HPQ Silica in Bahia, Brazil, because I was living there at the time. And the asset that we now have came up in that search. I identified a PhD candidate who wrote a paper on it, exceptional paper. Contacted that PhD candidate, and that was the initiation of Homerun, was that conversation. And then when I identified the value proposition of silica in that energy transition, and the value proposition particularly of the high quality silica that we have in the resource there, we just went running as fast as possible, because we realized we had one of Mother Nature's great treasures within our grasp. It's been a long process, and it will continue to be a long process, but as stated previously, our goal is to partner or control that district. That's important relative to the development of that district properly, and to maximize the value of that district, both over the medium and short term business life. There's a very large resource there, so it'll go way beyond my life, and unfortunately probably beyond yours. Unless the annual demand is massive, which would be great. But our goal since the beginning on that resource is, since Mother Nature gifted it, we needed to take responsibility relative to how it was used. That resource should never go into anything less than an HPQ industry end use. Those don't exist, generally speaking, in Brazil. They're being built or contemplated as we speak, but historically those have not existed. So I give credit to the owners, either previous or current, in not selling out that resource into use cases that don't need it. And so from that perspective, that represents, a Cape Flattery, spruce pines type resource where it needs to be cared for and utilized in the highest end uses possible. And that's my personal mandate, but that's also the mandate of the company.
Could you summarize the key news or sort of milestones that have happened so far in 2024?
The first half of 2024 was really focused. I think the key mandate was just focused on logistics. We're still in that process. That mandate was twofold. One was put the logistics in place relative to cash flow, and cash flow as quickly as possible. But to do that within the context of minimal capex. So, if we had millions and millions of dollars in the treasury, we would have just gone out and bought all the logistics capabilities, but that's not what we had. We had good money in the till, but we've used that money relative to building partnerships on the logistics side and utilizing Capex investment that's already in place. That takes a little longer because you have to identify partners. You have to sit down with those partners. You have to create win-win situations with those partners. Our team has done a really good job of that. And there'll be a sequence of announcements that demonstrate that work. Along with that, we've been trying to improve or add to, not improve, but add to the development that we're doing in the verticals. And we've had some announcements along those lines. Why that's so important is in the medium to long term, and sometimes medium is not that far away. But in the medium to long term, those represent significant additional unicorn opportunities within the context of our business model. And so from that perspective, we need to work on those, and we need to work on those, as a sideline to the core business, which is to get our resource into the marketplace and achieve the maximum price possible on top of the logistics that we put in play. So minimize capex, maximize speed to cash flow, and be able to scale over top of those developments.
So then what's your current cash position and also working capital position?
We've got a few $100,000 in the working capital position. We add to that on a monthly basis through the exercise of warrants. That's not difficult because the warrants are at 20 cents, the first set. That financing was done with individuals who have added to their positions since they did that 10-cent financing. But those 20-cent warrants are being exercised, but they're being exercised without hurting the market. So in other words, people aren't dumping their stock on the market in order to exercise those warrants. And so from that perspective, we are in a really good situation until we do need heavier capex, but at this point in time, we don't. So, there'll be small fundings like the ones that we've done historically. We've only raised $2 million into $1 million financing. So from that perspective, we want to keep the dilution down. And now with the valuation that we have the ability to raise those same amounts, if not a little more, with even lower dilution, which is great for the shareholders who invested already.
You have done a lot on a very tight budget. What's your current sort of base G&A burn rate and exclude capex related or other sort of one-off items?
Yeah, our biggest, the one-off items have been, the first payment under the CVPM lease, the payment that is upcoming relative to the just announced Guidoni lease transfer, and then the largest capital outlay, because it's $500,000 US, has been the MRE that we're coming to the end of actually, and that's pretty well completely financed. So, then we go back to our monthly burn, which is probably around 100,000 US max.
In the presentation, you went through the primary use of silica, But so could you add some color to sort of give an overview of the silica market? Where are the primary silica deposits located? How do they vary in purity? And also, what does the supply-demand outlook for silica look like?
Good question. There's smaller assets that we don't really focus on around the world that produce relatively high quality, but they're small. And so they don't have long-term competitive prospects.
Sorry to interrupt you, but what is small in the silica space?
These are several million tons, and they're distributed all over the world. They're just, these anomalous high quality silica opportunities within the context of either a bigger, lower quality body, or they're just, some small little thing that happened in the context of Mother Nature doing what Mother Nature does. And so from that perspective, the true players are Mitsubishi through Cape Flattery in Australia, which is a significant asset and has been for years. And so from that perspective, they use most of that product within their own industry verticals. So they're more of an integrated player, but that is a good asset. Cape Flattery is lower quality as it sits on the ground versus us. So we have a higher natural grade. And then the other and most advanced player is Spruce Pines, which is Sibelco in the Carolinas in the United States. And that asset is actually the highest purity at the end of the process. So they dominate the top of the pyramid, but they do that within the context of multiple stages of cost. It's not a single resource. It's a poly or a multiple resource deposit. They have to blast it. They have to crush it. They have to grind it. They have to separate it through flotation. That gets them to a product that's basically what we have sitting on on the ground, and we can remove with a front end loader. And then they process that through calcination and leach, traditional techniques. And those traditional techniques are common in the industry. And they take that up into those 4.9s, 5.9s, etc., and deliver that into the high end use space. So I would argue that is probably the asset that is most competitive to us. But you can see by how I described that the operating costs to produce a ton of high quality silica for those folks will be a lot higher than the operating costs to produce a ton of high quality silica for us.
Why is your silica or your silica sand of lower operating cost than the large producers in Australia, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we're lower operating costs than Cape Flattery. I know there's another company on the tail end of Cape Flattery that has a portion of that resource, and their Capex numbers are massive. Sibelco is actually the largest shareholder in that opportunity, and there's a merger going on to bring the two junior Australian companies together, but the Capex is huge for processing. If you watch a video that we came across on Sibelco's processing method, which is really good, it's an excellent video, but it just shows you the stages, blasting, collecting, crushing, grinding, flotation separation, calcination, leaching. There's a lot of stages that Sibelco goes through to be the highest purity silica quartz player in the world. And we're way down the processing path versus them, because our high quality product sits in a bucket on a hill. And you literally, the extraction technology is a front end loader. And then you move that product to the various processing mechanisms that you want. But what we've decided to do is disrupt the silica business. And that's why we did our relationship with UC Davis in order to mandate that disruption. And we've been successful so far, for instance, with the laser technique to processing. So that's clean and green and very effective, because there's only one step. You zap our silica sand with a laser, and the impurities remove themselves. It's atomic separation using the laser heat. It excites the impurities at the atomic level. They rise to the surface, and then they burn off into vapor in the process. So you get a really high purity product using that technique. So again, disruption is the key to building value for a startup, and we are in the process of disrupting traditional silica processing. but that will be proprietary. So sorry to our competitor.
I have a few questions on what you said, yes, but first I would like to ask. So, I mean, you showed us the pyramid, ultra high purity silica and also hyper silica, which you have now the technique to produce. What is that used for, and how is the demand for that growing?
The highest quality silica is an input into technology products like silicon. That purity dictates the processing that's required on the silicon. I hope that makes sense to you. But the higher the quality of the silica that goes into the first stage of producing silicon, the less steps that are required in the purification of silicon. Pretty natural outcome from a pretty natural context. So that is really key. There are other high purity uses like crucibles. Crucibles are the little cups within which you produce these high quality metals. We're focused on silicon carbide. Our view is that the band gap distinction on silicon carbide versus traditional silicon positions silicon carbide to be the next sort of generation of silicon because it requires less energy. It produces less heat in the process of doing what it's doing. And so from that perspective, it's a perfect complement to the heavy processing needs within the context of supercomputing and within the context of artificial intelligence processing.
So silicon carbide is, in other words, a semiconductor that is used in various AI and other CPU applications.
Correct. Silica plus graphite.
So let's talk about your actual resource in the Belmonte high purity silica district. How did you get a hold of it? I assume that you bought it from CBPM, and what payments and royalties do you have to make on it?
Another good question. Actually, nobody's ever asked that question. The first relationship that we had in the district is one of the owners, probably owns a third of the district, and that was a supply agreement. We went with a supply agreement because it facilitated our ability to supply into any early stage opportunities. It's already permitted. They don't do any volume. They do a small amount of volume every month into a small processor in Sao Paulo. So they were open to a supply agreement. We will utilize that silica going forward because it presents a solution for international sales relative to not paying any extra royalties versus what we've negotiated. So we get that for $20 a ton, and we do the work. So it's basically a flat royalty of $20 per ton. There's no minimum quantities. There's a maximum quantity. Not sure why that's in there, but there is. So that can provide up to 50,000 tons a month. And I'm sure that if we went back to the owners that they would easily raise that amount. They just wanted to make sure that we didn't dominate the asset relative to having being able to sell it domestically. But they're not doing that because, again, as I stated, there isn't much domestic demand for that product unless we build it. The second relationship came from our CBPM partnership. That took a while. The process of acquiring a government asset in Brazil is a regulatory process. It's quite detailed. It's designed to avoid corruption, which historically has been a problem in Brazil, where the vendors or the politicians or people within the context of the public sector are trying to solicit payments in regards to facilitating. So none of that exists with CBPM, so it was actually really good. But we still had to go through an auction process. We had to present an alternative strategy versus anyone else that came into that auction process. And then there's a time attached to that auction process so that it's, a fair process. So between target, early stage LOI to get the data, and put together our submission as an offer, I think it was 10 months to do that entire process. And then that culminated in the execution of the formal lease agreement, which was in December of 2023. We've just recently announced a new acquisition or transition or transfer of a lease. The lease is with CBPM, our partner, but the company's called Guidoni. They're a traditional stone company in Brazil, one of the biggest. And that took a while to put together. There was some competing interests on that, but we won that process as well. We put together a really good deal relative to what we see as the ultimate resource that will be available to us from that transaction. And we have ongoing dialogue with various players. There's only one real other player, two other players, one small in the district. And those dialogues are I call it term. They're at terms. And that's relative to executing on our mandate to either own or control that entire district through partnership. That's really important. And we're deep into that mandate, and we're getting close to the end of that mandate.
And on the CPPM sort of land, or the land that you got from them, what was the royalty? Was it $10 or?
Yeah, it's $10, and then we initiated a strategy whereby which they would take one of their dollars and we would add a dollar. So it's effectively $11 to them. But our extra dollar and their contributed dollar, those $2 for every ton, go into public education programs in the jurisdictions within which we will have footprint in Bahia. We push for that mandate. What's interesting is that now they've built that mandate into all of their new transactions. So we're proud of that because we transitioned the way that they talk into the way that they walk. And now entities that want to do deals with CPPM will have to do similar social responsibility royalties on top of the CBPM royalty.
Speaking about that, what's your how are your local community relations in the state of Bahia?
There isn't much of a community around where the resource is. There's a very small town within probably a kilometer or two of the resource. That town is pro-development of that resource. That town has had really no industry since the end of the traditional industry that was in that area, which was cacao. The cacao industry in Brazil has been hammered by competition from Africa, and that's created a significant amount of joblessness in that area. Bahia has one of the highest unemployment rates in Brazil as a state. In the particular area where we operate, the unemployment rate is extreme. So any economic benefit that we can bring to that area, whether that's facility or direct contribution to social programs, is of benefit to those people, inclusive obviously of those people becoming some of the workers within our organization, which again would be a proud moment for Homerun because we will have achieved our mission, which is to do all of those things plus protect the environment.
So just to get everyone on the same page, this is silica sand. Is that on the surface, or does it sort of start from surface and go down underground?
It's on the surface and has continuity to depth. So when you're standing on the resource, you literally are standing on what appears to be the whitest beach sand you've ever seen.
I know that you have done quite a lot of auger drilling. Do you know, but it extends more to depth than what they can drill by auger?
Yeah, no one in the district has actually reached depth. I know one entity in the district is below 30 meters in one location, and they're still in the same quality. So unfortunately, when you're using an auger to produce a resource, you're restricted by the capabilities of the auger, which really taps out at about 10 meters. The auger can go deeper, but what happens is if you go too deep, the pressure at those depths just caves the hole, and you end up getting contribution into your sample that's not from the actual drilling, it's from the walls around it. And anyone who knows geology knows that that's no good. So even though you've got uniformity here, you still have to work within the context of how that type of drilling program is completed. And that's what we're doing. So we have a large area, 2,000 meters, but you can see 2,000 meters is going to drill 200 holes.
When do you expect to put out the 43-101 compliant mineral resource?
It'll come off the MRE. We're doing it at that quality. We brought in a really good QP to do that. Nico's done multiple 43-101s for the PSX venture across multiple different companies. If anything, he's too detailed. But that's good. That's what you want. And so the quality controls that we have in place, the way that the drilling's being done, the methodology, everything is just totally first class. And that's good. So that will deliver us a resource into the 43-101. As an aside, I wouldn't have done this program unless it was required under the CBPM lease. If you ever have the chance to visit the resource, you'd never question whether or not it's there or sizable, because you're standing on a giant pile of sand. The jungle comes to the edge of the sand, but nothing grows on it. And because nothing grows on it, it's just this big white area wherever the sand is. It's in multiple pods across the area of the resource. And nobody really knows what's at depth. No one's drilled that, but at some point we will drill to depth to determine, what the source is of this silica sand. It'll be some kind of hard quartz source, but it's probably very high grade.
And when do you expect to release the MRE?
I think we're over 3/4 of the way through the drill program. The sampling will be the hurdle that we have to get over. We've got a lot of assays at SGS in Brazil pending. We put out one update. The next update is probably going to be the final resource with a final number. I don't like interim reporting. It gives a false representation of the total resource. But we did that just to give people context relative to where we're at and what kind of grades we're getting. And they're in the context of what we would expect. The top meter of the drill program is almost always contaminated with foreign particles. Just like the top of a beach, unfortunately, is contaminated by foreign particles. You get the same thing in these types of deposits. And then every so often you'll get external leakage that brings, again, foreign components into a portion of what you're drilling. And then sometimes you will hit an old area of the original geology that contaminates the drill as well. So you have to look at these things in the context of all of the drilling and what comes out of all of that drilling, which will be a very large resource relative to what we expect our annualized throughput to be. So our goal is that this resource extends obviously beyond the 20-year life of the initial lease. And anything additional to that is great. But remember, within that context, as we previously stated, we're in the resource when we stop drilling. So, I don't know what you would add to the resource, but you can obviously determine that whatever number we come out with from the drilling, what's there is bigger because it continues at depth in most of the areas where we're drilling.
Would you like to give us a conservative ballpark figure on the size and grade of it?
I've always said it's going to be somewhere between 50 and 100 million tons.
At a grade around 99.8% or so, it's...
Yeah, I mean, when you get into the good stuff, you're really high. You're in that 99.75, 99.85. But again, that first meter is contaminated. And if you're reporting this stuff properly, you're reporting the first meter. So, some historical, assays that were done have skipped the first meter. They've only assayed the really clear stuff, which you can visually identify. Like if I took you there and showed you one hole that was top to bottom and had some contamination in it, and one hole that was drilled into an area that had no contamination. And what I mean by contamination is that these are just foreign elements that have moved into the area in the sand. So they're not in the silica, and that's what's really important. So when you're seeing a grade over a distance right now, that assay includes some of those foreign contaminants. When you're seeing a pure assay relative to a clean product that's just silica, you'll get a much higher grade. And if you look at the work that was done by Anzaplan, that's what they did. They washed and sorted this. For some reason, the fines and the lumps have more contaminants attached to them. But the vast majority of the contaminants in this silica are what we call attached. In other words, they're not inclusions. They're not inside the actual silica grain. They're attached. That's really easy to remove. Sometimes you can just wash it off, and sometimes you have to use what's called attrition, which is basically using the sand against itself to act almost like sandblasting does. And the sand actually functions as sandpaper against itself. So, attrition is just moving the sand, and that takes off most of the contaminants. So what's really interesting about this, not to go into too much detail, but this just shows you the quality of the product, is that when Anzaplan washed this stuff and eliminated the fines and the lumps, they ended up with 99.95. And when they applied traditional physical processing, they ended up with 99.98. So you don't get a lot of benefit from this product by doing physical processing, which means that this product washed and sorted and dried is a very marketable product at a relatively high price, hundreds of dollars. But it also means that if you really want to upgrade this, you have to go straight to heat, right? Traditionally, that's been calcination with acid leach, and calcination is using fire, obviously, to heat the product, hydrocarbon, and then dropping that heated product into acid, and heating the grains moves the impurities that are inside the inclusions, the little bubbles. It moves those impurities to the outer layer of the grain, and then the acid kills those or removes those impurities. And again, going back to what we said with the laser excites the impurities at an atomic level, moves those impurities to the outer area, but then the laser itself actually eliminates those impurities by vaporizing them. So if you think of Star Trek, sorry, I'm aging myself, those photon torpedoes are exactly what the laser does to the grain of sand. So in conclusion here, what I'm trying to get at is the purity of the grains is what's important. The attached impurities are irrelevant. They're easily removed. In our case, they're removed, generally speaking, by washing it. And then we need to go straight to thermal, because this product is so high quality. There's no point in wasting your time on attrition or magnetic separation or flotation or any of these traditional physical processing techniques. The idea is you just clean it, sort it, and take it straight to some kind of thermal processing. Hence, when I saw that, I came up with the idea, hey, let's use some modern techniques to do this. And that's when we went to UC Davis and said, hey, can you guys use thermal electric techniques to do this? And that's what they do. That's what they do in their lab. And they got excited, and they've done that. And lo and behold, what we envisioned is exactly what happened. The laser took it to 99 or 59. So you can see by that this product is extremely susceptible to thermal processing, which means it's going to be an extremely valuable product at the top of that pyramid.
What is the expected time to permit the resource once you have the MRE?
It's relatively quick after you have the MRE. In Brazil, you can get permitted quite quickly versus most jurisdictions. In this particular case, the type of permitting we're looking for is quarry permitting, because we're not doing any blasting. We're not using any chemicals at site. All we're doing is taking a front end loader and scooping this stuff up and putting it on a truck. So the permitting process in Brazil for that type of operation is localized. And obviously, at least one other resident, more than one resident in that area has been permitted. So there's no barrier to permit, and the permitting process is very fast.
So we are talking a couple of months, or?
Yeah, procedurally, probably a couple of months. But again, we already have access to a permitted resource. So from that perspective, yeah, getting a permit doesn't delay any cash flow.
So you have already begun to consolidate the Belmonte Silica District. How much more room is there for further consolidation, and is there sort of quality of the resources that you would be consolidating of the same quality, around 99.567%?
Quality, the resource based on historical work done in the entire district is pretty uniform. As stated previously, once in a while you hit a little clay zone here or there, and that top 1 meter is obviously contaminated with other things that come from the weathering process. But generally speaking, very uniform across the sections of the resource in the district. So if you look at what we have acquired through our CBPM relationship, that's about a third of the district. We've now added to that with our Guidoni relationship. Our supply agreement covers about a third of the district. And then there's one other entity, and they have a third of the district, obviously. So there's really three players. There's another player, like Guidoni, but a little bit smaller, I believe. And that group, we're in dialogue with that group as well. So from that perspective, the pathway to consolidation is pretty clear, and it's just a process over time. And we've demonstrated that we can do that effectively based on the last 18 months.
Mining silica and also processing it is quite a bit different from sort of the usual metals, whom I think most investors are familiar with. Could you just walk us through how do you mine it? How would you process it? And also, who would do that for you?
From a mining perspective, it's really a front-end loader, and I'm not joking. I mean, you can use a conveyor hopper system when you start to get higher volumes, and we will do that eventually. But at this point, you just use a front-end loader or a series of front-end loaders. On that portion of the business, we will contract that out to a service provider. There's absolutely no reason for us to buy yellow equipment in this process. And then we would just pay them a fee per ton for the extraction. On the processing side, really to get this product to market, the required process is obviously extraction, and then move it through a wash process, move it through a sorting process. And that sorting process is really simple. It's to remove the fines, the really small stuff, and to remove the lumps, the bigger stuff, and have a sizing that sits within the standard industry sizing for the various industrial groups that use silica sand. And so when you do that, interestingly enough, based on work that's been done in the past, you actually upgrade the product. That product is then suitable for sort of medium to high end use in that silica space, if you remember the pyramid in the presentation. And you're basically done other than the logistics of moving that product to market. If you want to take that product higher grade, into 4.9s and 5.9s, then you require heat. The standard process for doing that is calcination and acid leach. And again, we're working with UC Davis and had success so far in looking at thermoelectric techniques for transitioning that product into higher grade.
Could you give a ballpark range of the cost to mine this on a per ton basis?
To be conservative, let's go $10 on extraction. I think that's obviously high. On process, let's go another $10 on processing. So you're at $20 basically for extraction and processing. Logistics is dependent on kilometers moved.
Okay, but in other words, you would be, since you already can sell this for the 99.8% pure, you can already sell this to sort of optical glass for 150 to 300 USD, perhaps even more. I don't know.
Yeah, for the solar glass vertical, for instance, that we don't even need that grade. For the initial HPQ grade, you need 99.5. And what people need to understand is it's not as much about grade as about the quality of the impurities. So if you have high iron content, then you have to upgrade the product a lot. And we have very low iron content in the natural form of the silica. Again, as I stated previously, our inclusions, the impurities inside the silica, do not have any iron in them. The iron is attached. And so from that perspective, removing the iron and getting the iron content to even a lower grade is relatively easy from a processing perspective. But in most use cases, we don't need that. The cutoff for iron content in the solar glass space is about 100 to 120 ppm, and we're well below that on simply washing it and sorting it.
And the washing, sorting, and drying it and bagging it, where will that be done?
You always do that at site. Yeah, that's better to be done at site. In the process of extracting, you move it through those types of processing steps. The bag goes into the truck, and then the bag is taken down to your access to a port facility. And then The reason you put it in a bag is because that's the easiest way for us to move the product, because loading onto a ship utilizes a crane versus having to build a complicated feeder system with conveyor.
And what capital investments are associated with getting sort of washing, drying, and bagging?
Hopefully relatively, or hopefully close to zero based on some partnerships that we're working on. And then the cost would be trucking. We already know that cost. We have a service provider lined up. And then there's the loading costs. In the early stages, we will utilize everything third party. At some point in time in the medium to long term, our intention is to build out our own ocean terminal, in close proximity to where we're extracting the product and processing.
Fantastic. So in other words, it's the margins are good, and so say that you start production end of the year, begin sometime in the first half of next year. What production profile would you envisage for next year?
We've had various interest in the product at price points that make margin. We can't service those types of agreements until we're ready to process. They can't take the material in the raw form. We've had interest, a lot of interest in the material in the raw form, but that's usually sub $100, and current shipping rates don't support that valuation. So you need to get the product into the north of 100 price range as far as delivered product in order to cover that, based on the cost that I've already stated. So the volumes that have been solicited on the raw product are hundreds of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of tons per month. The volumes that we want to deliver would be probably starting around 50,000. Obviously scaling to that, because logistics is a scaling process. You don't turn a light switch on in logistics. So 10 first month, sort of 20 the next month, etc. As you scale up to the first 50 and then scale up to the 100. But we've got legitimate incoming interest in that product at those levels. And then again, our own intention is to use that product in Brazil. And the perfect world is that half the product being extracted is going into our domestic use, and half the product being extracted is going into international use. And if we hit those targets over the next little while, even if it takes 24 months to get to that total volume, with the margins that we foresee and the benefits of using our own product, you're going to see pretty sizable EBITDA coming out of that.
Okay, if you would like to give a conservative estimate of the production run rate that you're seeing in end of 2025.
It'd be nice to get into that close to 100 on a monthly basis. Again, that's an exercise in logistics, not an exercise in demand. And so if we can scale our logistics properly to get to that level, and that's really managing a truck fleet, right? The extraction is relatively easy. The processing is relatively easy. It's managing a truck fleet within the context of the infrastructure that's available in Brazil, and then managing a port facility in the same manner. And then, to achieve that, you have to ship obviously through larger ships, 25,000 tons minimum, to get economics, but bigger ships are better economics, the more size. So from that perspective, I think that's doable, is to get to 100,000 plus a month at the end of that 2025 period.
So firstly, when you mine your first couple of thousand of tons of high purity silica, where will you ship and sell that?
That's most probably going to Asia, based on the interest levels that we have. And then what we get paid for that will be dependent on our ability to process it. Remember, at the top of that pyramid, the volumes are quite a bit lower. Hundreds of thousands of tons represents percentage points in that top volume. The numbers that we see from the market are that top of the pyramid is roughly around several million tons and is headed towards 10 million tons. So our goal at the top of that pyramid at some point in time, between now and 2030, would be to try and capture, 10% of that plus. And if we can achieve that, you can do the math on that. 1 million tons at the high end of that market is a significant top line number.
Yeah, it sure is. But so in the beginning, you wash, you dry, and bag it, and then you ship it straight ahead since it's already such high grade to the sort of end consumer.
Correct.
And then so could you explain? You have I mean, there is a physical upgrading facility in Ilheus. I can't really pronounce it, but it's quite close if you barge it on the coast. Is that to produce solar glass? Or
Yeah, I mean, ultimately the barge logistics will take time. That's a medium to long-term plan because we have to modify the loading terminal that sits in Belmonte. It's got corporate ownership and we have a relationship with that corporation. And we're working out right now actually with the engineers on what that looks like from a Capex perspective and the timing on that. Anything done at Tidewater like that requires a permit, and that permitting process, again, this is the medium to long-term solution. That permitting process will probably take north of 12 months. So in the interim period, we will move that product to the port of Ilheus or a similar product with similar distance or a similar port, similar distance. And then we'll be able to use that facility. Those facilities don't need processing. They just need storage and loading. And again, if we're bagging our product, the loading is very simple. And from that perspective, storage is very simple. Nice thing about silica sand is you don't need to store it in a dry space. You can store it, open to the elements. The bags are sealed, right? And silica sand is sand. It's not going to get injured by contact with moisture.
But today, is there a sort of a solar glass facility in Ilheus?
Solar glass? No, there's no solar glass facility in the Americas, period.
In order to make solar glass, do you just need, I mean, your purity is enough. You don't need any thermal processing or anything like that.
No, just washed and sorted. That goes straight into the solar glass burner. But there is no, in North America and South America, there is no dedicated solar glass capacity.
Because you have a long-term plan to have your own solar glass facility.
Correct, but that won't be built in Ilheus. That'll be built somewhere around the Camaçari Industrial Park in Salvador.
Okay, because that's where you have that's where Cymex is located?
That's where Cymex will be building their plant, correct. That's also the center of the universe for industrial corporations, basically, in the northeastern part of Brazil, which is called Nordeste. So there are large entities there. There is all of the utilities required are in place, including energy, power. It's already built out for large industrial processes. It's a ghost town, generally speaking. Probably 70% of it's a ghost town because it's been completely wiped out by the transition of manufacturing in Brazil to China. So the idea is to revitalize that area, bringing in the government's idea at the federal and state level is to transition that area into energy transition uses, and that's happening. That's where BYD, for instance, is locating its, South American headquarters is in Camaçari. And there's other very large companies there already that are successful, but I foresee that a lot of new companies will come there because it has all of the raw material inputs that are required for most industrial process.
And could you explain the road to getting to having your own solar glass plant?
We've already engaged the engineering group, so what they're waiting for is to find out what the footprint will look like, what the land package will look like, so that they can finalize the engineering relative to a particular topography, which is important, obviously. And then they have a turnkey facility. They will design that turnkey facility relative to the specs that we want to support. In this particular case, it'll be specs that support the Brazilian market, but there's pretty standard specs in solar glass. And Brazil is not a first mover marketplace relative to technology. It's a low cost marketplace relative to technology. So you don't need to build the most advanced product in Brazil. You need to build a effective product that has a good price point. So that group's in place. Permitting process is probably 12 months going by our conversations with Cymex and what they're going through right now in the permitting process. And that's from point of getting the ground, right? Once we get the ground, the engineering, we'll finalize over a period of months. And then that engineering will be the basis for a construction permit and an operating permit.
Do you have any idea of the cost, and also how you would be able to reduce it, and or if you're considering any partnerships or joint ventures to own this solar glass plant?
Yeah, I mean, the corporate structure is designed to prevent dilution for Homerun. Homerun is involved in several businesses. It doesn't need to own 100% of every one of them. So the idea behind the solar glass is we create a company that's focused on manufacturing solar glass. That may extend beyond Brazil, and we look for early partnership in that. We're in dialogue with organizations that already make solar glass in order to facilitate and expedite that. The reality is you got to build the plant, and then you can sell the product. That plant should be able to produce product for international markets, but I think based on our previous conversation and our knowledge base, the secret to solar glass is to be in the market where you're selling it and to move the raw materials to that market if you want better logistics. So if one were to use our silica to produce solar glass for the US, you're probably better off building a solar glass plant along the east coast of the United States.
If you have your solar glass plant in Salvador, you ship, say, let's for simplicity's sake, you sell one, or you have 1 ton of silica as input. How much solar glass can you get out of it? What's the pricing for that?
You're going to get solar glass in China sells for $10 per unit. The delivered cost to Europe is multiples of that. The delivered cost to United States is multiples of that. That extra cost is all logistics. Moving glass is expensive. And in Brazil, our unit costs will most likely be higher than China, but based on proximity to a large manufacturing capacity that's going to be built in Camaçari, we will be able to deliver that product at really low logistics prices. So what we lose on the unit cost side, we will easily make up for on the logistics side. Hence, that will make us the lowest cost solar glass producer in what should be the second largest solar glass build out over the next few years in the world.
Solar glass, what other use case does that have besides solar panels, which I think everyone should be quite or familiar with the demand curve for?
Well, solar glass is used in solar. So from that perspective, it's called solar glass because it's a higher end product than normal glass. It has very few impurities that invade on the efficiency of that solar cell. So if you're buying cheap Chinese solar glass, you're going to get a lower quality product, which is a product that is not as efficient as a higher quality solar glass product. With that said, in Brazil, historically, they don't care. What they're looking for is not 21 going to 21.5. They're looking at some baseline of deliverable efficiency from that solar panel and cost. So in Brazil, you're dealing with a different market than you would be, for instance, in Canada, where you're looking at efficiency and cost. Because in Canada, you have a lower solar resource, generally speaking, than you have in Brazil. So, Brazil is kind of the Saudi Arabia of solar, whereas Canada would be a peripheral energy producer in that analogy. So with that said, cost is really important. Standardization is really important. And that standardization is reflective of the end user. So a solar glass producer with a large offtake contract is going to produce that product for those offtake contracts.
Moving on to the other vertical or use for your silica, which is that you have recently, just a few months ago, proved that it's possible to produce 99.999% pure silica through a thermal laser processing method in collaboration with UC Davis of University in California. Could you explain the significance of this, and also will this translation into you building a thermal processing facility sometime in the future, or how will you monetize this?
Yeah, great question. And the benefit of this is twofold. And I think people need to understand this. Silica that can go to 99.99 or 99.995 or 999.59 that silica is a particular quality of silica from the start. So the fact that we've achieved that, excuse me, with a laser is not as important as the fact that we've achieved that. Laser is just a thermal processing technique, right? Calcination, in other words, using hydrocarbon standard process, is a thermal processing technique. What it tells you is that our silica can be taken to very, very ultra high purity using thermal processing, period. So that's one. And that needs to resonate with people because there's only so many products on the planet that deliver that high purity, and they're very few and they're very scarce. So we have that. That's step one. So an investor can be comfortable now that they're investing in one of the top purity silica companies in the world because we've already achieved that purity. How you do that is irrelevant. We've achieved it. The second step is disruptive. Okay. Using lasers or what we call thermoelectric processing techniques is disruptive in the space. The process of thermally altering silica is a 100-year-old process. It's calcination with acid leach. It's not changed for years. They use different forms of acid. They use better efficiencies. They cycle the acid versus just throwing it into some waste stream, et cetera, et cetera. The reality is the actual physical process has not changed over that time period. And what that means is everybody is locked into that. So a standard industrial player in the silica space has already built the Capex and infrastructure to do that. We haven't spent that money yet. So as a first mover on thermoelectric, we have an advantage because we're not reliant on a historical Capex spend, which says, whoa, we don't want to redo or be redundant on Capex and neutralize the value of our previous Capex. So they're going to continue down that path. And you see that across transition, right? In the solar industry per se, the new solar perovskite is being transitioned into something that can complement current manufacturing capacity. It's not replacing it, generally speaking, although that's starting in China. It's complementing. That's why we have a tandem solar now versus a complete silicon solar. We're just adding perovskite. That is only related to the manufacturing process. It's not related to what's the best use of perovskite. So industry doesn't just throw out old Capex to run onto new Capex because shareholders don't like Capex. So from that perspective, people are transitioning to perovskite, and that's an example of how you transition. So moving from historical processing of silica, which is thermal, but it's done with hydrocarbons, to thermoelectric, thermal done with electricity, is a transition point. Anyone starting a new facility using those types of technologies is at a strategic Capex advantage because they don't have legacy Capex invested in their business. Will the others follow? Yes. But historically, if you look at transitions in industries, it's the disruptor that does it first, and then the others follow, or they buy the disruptor. So we plan on being the disruptor across all of our processes. And the taking our silica up to 5 nines is something that we need to do to compete at the top of that pyramid. We've achieved that now. We can do that with a traditional partner that has calcination and acid leach capabilities. So we can partner with somebody that has that infrastructure. We can sell them our product, and they can now use our product to achieve that end game. Where that's really important is in Asia, where they're running out of high-end silica. And so Asia has used a lot of the really high-end silica that can be processed into that ultra purity, and they're all over the planet looking for new sources. These are the folks that are contacting us to try and get our silica because they know that our silica can achieve 5 nines. We now have a demonstrable proof and data that we can achieve 5 nines. How you do that is irrelevant to the fact that our silica can do that. So that's a value transition into the entire resource because we've now proven for the first time that the Belmonte silica can go to 5 nines.
You're in Brazil, and so the resource is in Brazil. So would it be more advantageous to I mean, if you sell, either if you build together with a partner or if you sell the technology to some player in Brazil.
I'm not sure why we would sell the technology.
Yeah, me
I
neither,
think,
but you mentioned it.
yeah, no,
Or
we're
Brazil.
not going to sell the technology. We're going to sell the silica to somebody
Okay,
else who
sure.
has technology to advance it to higher nines. We wouldn't sell our proprietary technology. We would only partner with people who want to use it. And that's not tomorrow. Like, that's down the road. What we would look for currently is we would look for parties that already have the 100-year-old processing capability in place. And we'd go, hey, instead of buying that really low-grade silica that you're trying to process really expensively to high-grade silica, why don't you buy our really high-grade silica in the ground and process that to high-grade silica? Now, what I'm saying is in Asia, they're running out of silica that goes into that processing to achieve those 5.9s plus. It's not a matter of, oh, we can just put in a new technology to do it. The raw material is running out. That's the issue in Asia.
But the partners would use your technology.
Yeah, we could advance the technology with a partner, but we wouldn't sell the technology because then we would create a competitor. If they want to buy the company to get the technology, that's a different story.
And have you patented the technology, and also is it scalable?
It's in process, and yeah, when we engaged with UC Davis, the plan was that we would only test technologies that were scalable at an industrial level.
When do you think you will know how you will use it commercially?
Yeah, I mean, commercially is an evolutionary process, right? So first step is to see it work in the lab. Second step is to pilot test it. So to actually build a pilot scale piece of equipment that can process, on a 24/7 sort of industrial process capability. That would be the next step. But the step prior to that is we own another silica quartz asset in British Columbia in Canada. And what we're doing right now, that product has been delivered to UC Davis. So their next focus is to take that product and transition that product up to higher purities. So that product is hard rock. That product will have to be crushed first and then processed, whereas our silica sand goes straight into the system. So there's another added step there. But if we can do that, that asset in British Columbia, if it can produce 5.9s, we now have a domestic North America product that can produce 5.9s. The process to powderize that is cheaper than moving our product in silica to North America.
And so ultimately, how much of your silica, say 3-4 down the road, do you think will go to the top end of the pyramid, i.e., the thermal?
If the prognosticators are correct and they see the market going from 3 million tons to 10 million tons, I think they might be conservative in that area based on what's going on with silica, because I don't think they're really counting on a large expansion in, for instance, the anode space. But anyways, with their model and going from 3 to 10, if we could capture 10% of that, everybody who currently owns our stock and buys it at multiples higher will be very happy.
Let's talk a little bit more about phase 3. You have a partnership with Halocell Energy for the production of perovskite. Could you tell us, especially for the layman's here, what the perovskite is, and also why is it going to sort of beginning to replace silicon in solar cells?
The replacement is simple. The process of creating silicon is super energy intensive and super expensive because of that. The rest of the silicon process is relatively simple. You ship it as a bulk commodity, you ship it as a bulk form, and then the manufacturers either buy it as wafer, or they buy it as a pre-built cell, or they buy a whole solar panel and distribute that. So that model has been in place for decades. The transition to perovskite is chemistry. Okay, perovskite is created through chemistry. It doesn't require the incredible amount of energy to be produced. Think of an inkjet printer or a spray gun, spraying a sequence of chemicals onto a substrate. Substrate's usually glass. So we win either way, whether it's silicon or perovskite, you still need glass. And glass is actually the biggest component of every solar cell from a weight perspective. So glass is the ignored component of solar, but it's required no matter what, which is good for us. But perovskite is a chemistry process. There are a variety of different formulas. I make the joke that perovskite is the equivalent to making chocolate cake. Everybody has the best recipe, but there's, literally hundreds or thousands of chocolate cake recipes. There are literally hundreds of recipes for perovskite. And within perovskite, you can tweak it. So in other words, you can dope it, tweak it, etc. And when you're doing that, you're making that perovskite suitable for certain use cases. Okay. Silicon doesn't really have that capability, right? Once you've built silicon, it's built. And also silicon has a physical barrier to higher efficiencies because of the fact that silicon per se is only effective in capturing certain of the sun's energy. And perovskite, as I said, can be tweaked to potentially capture the full spectrum of the sun's energy. So the physical limitation of perovskite is considerably higher than that sort of just under 30% limitation. Physical limitation, no one's achieved it. But silicon solar taps out at around 30% or just under 30% efficiency. Theoretically, perovskite can exceed that based on the fact that you can modify perovskite to capture multiple of the sun's energy that silicon will never capture. So perovskite as a product is cheaper to produce. It's chemistry. Perovskite as a manufacturing process is cheaper because you're not using all that heat and energy to do that. You're using spray guns and inkjet printers. And there's companies that are producing roll-to-roll perovskite right now. Like, imagine that, right? You've got a process where roll-to-roll is a manufacturing technique, right? Where you start with one end, and at the other end there's a roll of this stuff, and then that gets attached to a substrate, and that becomes the formation of a solar cell. Like, when we get to that level, it's going to be extremely difficult for silicon to compete with that. Silicon competes through volume manufacturing, mostly based in Asia, where they're producing, these massive fabrication facilities that cost billions of dollars and use a huge amount of heat, and they're, a tremendous burden on the environment, to be honest. The industry hides that. It's one of the worst industries for the environment, even though solar protects the environment. It's ironic. Perovskite gets around that front-end environmental issue. So ultimately, it's the best choice for a variety of different reasons. The one issue around perovskite is stability over time. Lots of players are working on that. It's just encapsulating it properly with the right materials so that you can get that 20-year life, that 10-year warranty, et cetera, But to put that into context, the Chinese now have dedicated perovskite solar capacity they're building, and they already have perovskite-only solar installations in China. Those guys lead the industry. That will follow in other areas of the planet. The cost per kilowatt hour is going to go way down. The Capex is going to go way down. The operating costs are going to go way down. The maintenance costs are going to go way down. So this is the next phase of solar that will take solar to be ultimately untouchable on the planet as an energy generation technology.
So then, what's the goal with your partnership with Halocell?
To participate in that growing industry.
Could you add some color on how could that be done and how that could benefit?
They've been working in perovskite. What we did was we have a partnership mentality to increase our velocity in our business model. They have 10 years of experience in perovskite. If you scan the perovskite world, in the developed world outside of China, you're going to find companies that are 2 years old, 5 years old, 3 years old, 6 months old, etc. Most of those companies are working on their own recipe for chocolate cake. We're not interested in that. We don't want to play in the chemistry side. Where we want to play is in helping that technology move to market at the lowest cost possible. And if we're operating in Brazil, we have a mandate to do that, because if we can do that, then we'll have that first complementary product to the initial solar that's going out there. And again, I'll repeat, the first iteration in the developed world outside of China of perovskite is tandem solar, which is perovskite on top of or in combination with silicon. And that's how you achieve the highest efficiencies in solar. And they're way beyond the maximum. They will be way beyond the maximum efficiency of silicon by itself.
Makes sense. So then, if we move to one of your other verticals, which is if you could add some color to your partnership with the Department of Energy in the US on using high purity silica for energy storage and battery anodes.
Yeah, combing through the internet, I found an energy storage technology that used sand. I was like, well, this is really interesting. What a clever idea. So the basic concept is simple, and we've all experienced it. When the sun hits the sand on the beach, you have to wear flip-flops in order to withstand that, right? That is thermal energy storage. That heat is being stored in that sand. So they take that same concept and they put it in a big silo, and electricity is converted into heat energy. That heat energy is stored in silica. The silica has to be of a certain quality. Otherwise, it will degrade. The actual silica will degrade over time, and you'll constantly be replacing the silica, which adds operating costs. So what I looked at was what's the temperature that they're achieving to do this, and the goal is that temperature will be somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 degrees Celsius. That is the exact temperature at which you calcinate. Calcination is a processing technique, as we spoke earlier, to thermally upgrade silica. So when I saw that, I went, wow, these guys are actually storing energy that could be used for something while that silica is storing it. In other words, processing the silica. That process is silica that then gets dropped into an acid leach or some other processing technology, and then can be sold theoretically, and that's what we're working on. But once we test that and prove it, you will be able to take a lower cost product, put it into that energy storage system, use the heat in the system. In other words, no cost of energy, because it's being stored anyway. That heat then leaves the system and gets sold as energy on the grid. So you're not interfering with the traditional energy storage revenue stream. You're adding to it. And the add is that a product going in at X comes out at X plus as a value proposition, and then is sold into the market as an upgraded product. Now, you're not going to do this in every single energy storage system around the planet. There would be way too much high purity silica for the demand. But you can do it selectively within the context of various markets, and then just use silica, high quality silica in energy storage systems that are just being used to store energy. So it gives you the opportunity to have a system that has an ancillary revenue. That would be the only energy storage system in the world that has an ancillary revenue.
So you're currently working on MVP for that?
Yeah, the MVP is actually financed by the U.S. Department of Energy, and we're working on that. Because of the relationship that we built with NREL, we're being invited to work on other aspects of that. Silica, as we've previously stated, is used in a lot of industrial processes. And in building out this system, it has requirements for silica and silicon in various aspects. So we're looking at various ways in which we can integrate our business model into that business model, as well as the potential to be a licensing partner, both on a global basis and on a regional basis of the actual system itself. So, these are all steps in a process. The first is that we demonstrate that that system can actually upgrade our silica. We know that if we apply that type of heat based on the work done by UC Davis, we're going to end up with a higher end product. So that's not an issue anymore. That's tested and proven. That the issue now is, how do we do that within this machine? And that's something that we'll work on with the U.S. Department of Energy, a pilot program that's going to be built in Boulder, Colorado, over the next little while. We do have interest in our marketplace in Brazil in the implementation of that type of storage. We will have some dialogue with government ministries over the next while. We're very interested in creating better efficiencies in their alternative energy generation. For instance, the folks that have wind utilities and solar utilities have to modify the power generation relative to grid demand. Sometimes the grid demand exceeds their ability, but in many cases the grid demand is less than their capability. So energy storage and alternative energy is a very, very important thing. So we're actually in dialogue with, for instance, some associations and some government entities that represent those associations in Brazil, in looking at how we could implement this technology, which is really economically unchallenged at high rates of energy storage. So when you're looking at 100 megawatts there's nothing that competes with that. Like visualize 100 megawatt lithium ion energy storage system. That would be literally a disaster. So from that perspective, there are competitive bulk technologies, but they can't compete economically, Capex or operating cost wise with this system once it's at scale. So this is not something you're going to have in your backyard soon, maybe at some point. But as far as an industrial scale, grid scale, centralized or decentralized energy storage system, this is pretty competitive. And NREL's done all that work already.
When do you expect to have some sort of announcement on your potential new verticals, be either perovskite or energy storage?
We've made sort of systematic announcements as we have material development. We've got more coming. There's a business model unfolding in the perovskite space. We've been working on that over the last 6 months. There is obviously a business model in the solar glass space. We have early work being done by UC Davis relative to the battery anode space. And another area, as I stated previously, where we want to challenge is in silicon carbide. So we're not that interested in silicon. What we are interested in is the next generation of silicon, which we fundamentally view is silicon carbide based on its physical properties versus traditional silicon.
Is there a premium to solar glass or silica in general that is more sort of sustainable, i.e. less CO2 emissions during production and also transportation?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, everybody who cares about the planet is trying to build a zero CO2, zero carbon footprint. That's difficult in a lot of industrial processes because you're relying on third parties. And what I mean by that is, if you're using a trucking company, they would have to convert to EV. And so, this is happening and it will happen over time. But it takes time to be 100%. What we're looking at is what can we do within our core business? Again, using thermoelectric processing techniques versus hydrocarbons. That is a zero emission if that thermoelectric power is coming from an alternative power generation system. So ultimately, if you look at that, if you can go and produce, for instance, silicon carbide using electricity that's generated by a solar energy supplier, then you'll be effectively the first company in the world that has a zero carbon footprint for the production of silicon carbide. And that is possible within the context of technologies that currently exist.
Moving on to Brazil, how is Brazil as a jurisdiction to work in?
From a resource perspective, it's exceptional. I've done resource projects in a lot of different jurisdictions. Brazil has a standardized process of acquiring concessions. It's online, it's automated, very advanced. It has a standard process for moving those concessions forward. The penalty process in doing that or being delayed in that relative to economic cycles is not like other jurisdictions. You do pay a tax, but it's a relatively low tax. Once you have a mining permit, that tax goes away and it transitions to a royalty. The royalties are very low. The permitting process is probably one of the fastest permitting processes in the world. And the mining ministry in Brazil is on a mandate right now to expedite that. And they're not expediting by removing, environmental steps or anything like that. They want to expedite by building platforms that remove redundancy. And one of the states in Brazil, the state of Goiás, is really a poster child relative to having done that. They've taken what used to be a standard 8-year term for traditional metal production from resource down to somewhere around 3 to 5 years. So if you're comparing that to places like Canada, United States, where in some places, permitting is effectively impossible, and in some places permitting is now 10 to 20 years, Brazil has a definite strategic advantage for mineral development, and you will see that. The endowment of mineralization in Brazil is exceptional. It's as good as Canada or Australia or parts of Africa relative to the endowment. And it's a buffet. It's not, oh yeah, this country has a lot of aluminum or this country has a lot of hydrocarbons. This country has a lot of everything. And it's very high quality and it's accessible because the logistics in the country and the standard and weather in the country is very supportive of that type of thing versus say doing business in northern Canada.
Awesome. And so, in summary, what should we expect from Homerun in the coming 6 months?
I think, just simply put, we'll continue to achieve what we have announced within our 3-phase plan. That's exactly what we've done for 18 months, and that's exactly what we'll do going forward. Some of those things take longer because you're dealing with third-party process. Some of those things take longer because you're dealing with government entities. But the reality is we've shown that we can effectively build this company in Brazil, and we've done that. So I don't have any fear of achieving the end game. My concern is that people run out of time relative to investing in that end game. But I think in that regard, we've done a tremendous job of not only managing that process and executing, but maintaining the velocity in that. Now, again, we're in the silica space, so we don't have to drill out a resource over 5 years and, turn that into a bankable feasibility study over 5 years and get it permitted for 5 years and build it for 5 years. We'll do all of that in 24 months, which, that's an exceptional timeline relative to the resource that we have. And then on top of that, the core strategic advantage of this company is that gift from Mother Nature, which is that Belmonte silica that we have and are working to control.
Would you like to give us a conservative estimate on when or in what quarter or first half of the when you expect to have your first revenues?
Our target is end of this year, early next year. That target hasn't moved, but that target is related to logistics partners executing on their business models. So again, we're in process on all the things that we've talked about. Some things arrive early, some things arrive on time, and some things arrive a little after the target date, but they will arrive. And that's what people need to understand. So, effectively building a company is a process of patience and execution. We can't speed things up that we don't control. We can just move them along as best we can. So from that perspective, I think we're still on stride to do that. And again, it's going to be a scaled up process. It's not going to be we turn on a light switch and we're doing 100,000 tons a month. That literally is an impossibility from a logistics perspective anywhere in the world. But can we scale to that over a period of time? Absolutely. Other companies are doing that right now. So, and they're doing it with worse logistics. They're doing that with an inferior product. They're doing that in a higher Capex and a higher operating cost environment. So from that perspective, if they can do it, we have not executed if we're not doing it better based on the fact we're doing it in Brazil.
Where do you envision Homerun Resources in 3 years?
Bigger and faster. That's what we're doing. That's what we've done since day one. So it's a pretty easy answer. Yeah. I mean, everybody knows what my goal is. I won't be happy until, we've turned this gift from Mother Nature into, effectively into a new unicorn in the materials space. And we've built a business model that can do that in multiples if we execute in the vertical integrations that we've already put in place.